The arrival of the invincible Thea came, without warning, from the blackest corner of the universe. Moving like shadows across stars, the Varnik were known by many names in forgotten languages. They were called the Breakers, the Swallowers, the Flamewalkers. But to most they were simply death with eyes. Their ships were not ships at all, but floating beasts made of iron and lightning. They would descend on a planet, and in hours, that planet would belong to them. They did not negotiate, they did not offer. Surrender they took, and they crushed. And they are said the Galactic Council had once tried to resist them many centuries ago, when the Varnik first appeared, but that resistance lasted only 6 hours, before half the Council worlds were reduced to smoldering ruins. After that the universe stopped fighting them. Planets paid tribute, species offered their brightest as slaves. Even the bravest warriors of other empires dared not speak their name in public anymore. The Varnik had become legends, carved into memory through fear. So, when the Varnik ships picked up signals from a small blue world near a yellow sun, they did not hesitate. They marked the world for conquest. The name Earth meant nothing to them. It was another soft planet with a weak species. The humans looked like prey. They looked like all the others. The High Commander of the Varnik fleet, known as Vraxel, stood on the bridge of his flagship, his arms crossed behind his back as he studied the primitive data feeds they had gathered from Earth. He laughed, a deep thunderous sound that echoed through the command deck. These humans are still using combustion engines, he said. They are barely above stone tools. His captains laughed with him, confident in their power. They sent the first landing force to a small human settlement in a place called Wyoming on Earth. The terrain was flat, open, easy to control, the perfect place to display their power and bring the humans to their knees. But the humans did not kneel. As the drop pods hit the ground and hissed open, the Varnik soldiers stepped out, tall armored bodies shining under the weak sun. The first thing they saw was not terrified villagers or surrendering forces. It was silence and dust and something else, something strange. A whistling sound cut through the wind. Then the first Varnik scream. A blast ripped through the air from beneath the sand. An explosive homemade device buried by someone who had studied their landing pattern. The soldier closest to it lost his legs. The others scattered, confused and shocked. They had never seen a trap so crude yet so effective. Then came the gunfire, not from energy weapons or plasma rifles, but from humans with metal bullets and ancient rifles and unmatched rage. Varnik armor could withstand blasters and acid storms, but the bullets aimed for their joints, the weak points, the gaps. The ice-owned Varnik fell, then another and another. They had fought hundreds of species across the galaxy, but never had they seen such raw defiance, such reckless courage from creatures so physically weak. By the time the last Varnik tried to retreat, it was too late. A human stepped forward, a farmer by trade, his hands rough with work, his eyes full of fire and grief. He held nothing but a flame bottle, and a lighter ran toward the last alien without hesitation, and said himself and the creature Ablazith. Skies above Earth recorded the entire event and transmitted it back to the flagship. The silence on the bridge was thick. No one laughed, no commander. Vraxel stared at the screen, eyes narrowed. Prepper. The next wave, he growled. But this time do not underestimate them. For the first time in Varnik history, their forces had suffered loss, and the name of the planet was remembered. Dareth and its Pio-Plement's first blood-drawn sun had not yet risen again on Earth. When the second Varnik wave came this time, they brought heavier armor, faster skimmers, and mindhounds that could detect human thoughts hiding in walls, trees or underground. They landed in a ruined city, where smoke still rose from the bodies of their first fallen troops. They expected chaos and fear. They expected to step over the corpses of broken humans and reclaim their honor, but instead they were met by silence. The Varnik unit leader named Khazran was bred for war. Since the moment he hatched, his body was wrapped in black plates that could resist even nuclear fire. His voice was like rusted steel. He led 40 soldiers into the heart of the city, expecting no resistance, but something felt wrong. The buildings were hollow, the windows dark, the streets scattered with strange objects. Doiskaran paused for a moment, then motioned for his mindhounds to move ahead. They sniffed the air, tasted the ground, scanned with their psychic eyes, and found no threats until one exploded. Was not a mine or weapon, but a child's doll wired with a chemical reaction. The blast tore the mindhound apart and injured 3 soldiers standing nearby. Khazran roared in anger and ordered a sweep of every building. The soldiers moved quickly, entering homes, smashing through walls, but all they found were empty rooms and strange symbols drawn on walls and read. Something about it felt deliberate. Then came the sound, music from above a rooftop. An old speaker crackled to life, playing a song full of human rage and fear. Khazran looked up and the building exploded. The entire structure came down on top of 10 Varnik troops, and even with their armor they did not rise again, for the humans had placed reinforced beams and collapsing triggers timed with perfect precision. A figure appeared in the smoke. A woman with one arm and a long metal pipe in her hand. She wore torn clothes, her face covered in ash and blood, but her eyes burned brighter than any sun. Charged the nearest alien and struck with speed that defied her size. The pipe slid between the armor plates at the neck of a Varnic soldier, and he dropped to the ground twitching. Khosrin screamed and opened fire, but the woman vanished into a side alley, where dozens more humans waited with knives, spears, wires, and firebombs. The Varnic called for air support, but their signals were jammed. Their tech scrambled, their minds clouded in the sky above Earth. The flagship tried to reconnect, but received only one strange signal, an old human radio wave carrying words the translators barely understood. "You are not welcome here." Within an hour, 17 more Varnic soldiers were lost to skimmers destroyed, and the rest retreated in disarray from orbit. Commander Vraxel watched the footage with silent disbelief. They were not facing soldiers or warriors. They were facing farmers, nurses, students, children, and elders. They were facing a species that refused to bow even when death stared them in the face. For the first time in his long life, he felt something unfamiliar. Uniashishis was not a simple conquest anymore. This was wherein the humans had drawn first blood with nothing but rage and resolve. The human mind. Gamma Varnic had always won their wars not just with brute strength, but with logic, strategy, and technology. Their minds were enhanced through genetic rituals their commanders trained for decades in simulations that predicted every possible tactic of enemy races, but nothing in their Great War manuals had prepared them for the humans. Because humans did not follow patterns, they broke them. They laughed in the face of structure and burned the rulebooks of war, then rewrote them with madness. Commander Vraxel sent 3 squads equipped with pulse shields and enhanced pathfinders to a city called Lagos on the African continent. He had read that humans there had once survived plagues, floods, invasions, and civil war. He expected to learn from their resistance before erasing them, but the first squad was gone in 8 minutes. Not Kilajanathi had walked into a deserted port, expecting ambush. Instead, they found barrels stacked high all around, and a strange liquid on the ground. Fish oil. As they turned back, the barrels ignited from a floating drone made of scrap that hurled a firebomb into the heart of the formation. The blast was not strong enough to kill the Varnic through armor, but the slippery liquid and burning smoke sent them crashing into walls and falling into pits dug beneath the concrete. By the time the fires cleared, only one soldier crawled back with half his mask melted, and his voice box failing, kept repeating the same word, trickery. The second squad was smarter. They sent recon drones ahead, but the drones saw only dancing shadows on rooftops and strange metal panels with reflections. They reported no threat, so the squad advanced. That was their last report. On human sniper had set up dozens of mirrors all over the city, catching light and redirecting it, blinding sensors and creating ghost images. He used only 5 bullets, but everyone struck a target, and when the Varnic tried to triangulate his position, they found only speakers playing recordings of footsteps and laughter. By the time the third squad arrived, they refused to enter the city. They demanded extraction. Vraxel could not believe what he was seeing. Summoned his top tactician, a cold, calculating mind bred on a logic world. Explained this. He ordered. The tactician stared at the reports for hours, then finally said something that chilled the bridge. They do not think like us. They do not care about death the way others do. They embrace chaos. They use pain as fuel. They are illogical, untrained, emotional, and unpredictable. They are the worst enemy we have ever faced because they do not break under further grow, and they learn faster than we do. Commander Vraxel clenched his fist. No, Grolid, they are not gods. They are not demons. They are animals who will crush them. We must. But even as he said it, the screens around him flickered on by one, hacked by human code, not just military code, but school code, amateur code from basements and garages and coffee shops, and broken satellites. And every screen showed one message: "AO should not have come here." The turning terrain fell hard across the remains of New Kyoto as smoke rose from the broken towers, once proud structures now scarred by alien fire. But beneath the rubble something stirred. Not fear, not silence, but movement and voices and plans. The humans were not only surviving, they were adapting in a hidden tunnel deep underground. A young engineer named Lucas, once known for fixing farm tractors, now sat beside the wreckage of a fallen Varnic scout craft. He had never seen alien tech before. He had no degree in anything that mattered in war, but his hands were steady and his mind curious. He poked and rewired and triggered something, and within hours, he had learned how to fire the ship's plasma core manually, without access codes, without permission. And he was not alone. Across Earth, humans were taking broken pieces of Varnic machines and turning them into tools of survival. One woman in Peru made a defensive wall From alien armor plates welded with old bus parts, a retired teacher in Canada turned a Varnic drone into a flying hospital supply carrier using duct tape and old batteries. In Nigeria, a group of teenagers created sonic traps from scavenged parts that made Varnic helmets ring with paint. Varnic did not understand this behavior. No other species they had conquered had ever turned defeat into invention so quickly, so they responded with rage. Commander Vraxel ordered orbital strikes across 20 cities, flattening forests, schools, homes, anything that could hold life. He believed the message would break human spirit, that their screams would silence the resistance, but the humans did not scream. They roared. In the ruins of Seattle, 12 survivors led by a paraplegic veteran attacked a landing zone with modified mining tools and managed to bring down an entire enemy transport. The explosion echoed across mountains and was picked up by satellites and broadcast. Liveth message spread across the starsty. Are not defeated. They are rising in a devastated island once called Iceland, now frozen in ash and debris. A human girl only 15 used a broken alien panel as a shield and led a group of children through an ambush zone using hand signals and nothing else. When they reached safety, she looked back at the burning sky and whispered to the wind, "Are not praying somewhere far above in the safety of his warship." Vraxel felt something twist inside him, not fear but confusion, for he had seen this before in ancient stories of species that rose from fire stronger than before. He ordered a council meeting with his top generals, who had never failed a battle and now sat silent, their pride in pieces. Their eyes demon general finally spoke, his voice flat and heavy. "We kill them. They return, will burn their homes. They fight from the smoke. You take their leaders and 10 more Rizathi. Bleed and laugh. They fall and sink. They should have broken by now." Vraxel said nothing. He simply stared out the window at Earth, glowing like a wounded beast refusing to die, and wondered, how do you destroy a species that finds strength in pain? Fall of the Varnic. Kinked stars above Earth pulsed with the light of war. As Varnic ships held their position, afraid to descend again, the resistance had grown too wild, too clever, too human, so the Varnic did what they had not done in 10,000 years. They summoned their king. His name was Zoltran, the unburned ruler of 9 systems, breaker of stone mines, walker of void storms. His armor was made from the core of dead stars, and his voice could silence armies with one word. When he walked through the halls of the command ship, even the oldest soldiers stepped aside and lowered their gaze. "We'll go to Earth myself," he said, "not to fight, but to remind them who we reigned." So he came. The ground shook when his pod landed in the middle of what was once called Chicago, now a jagged battlefield of steel and bones. Humans watched from shadows, some ready to fight, others too tired to move, but all filled with the same fear. Zoltran stepped forward and raised his voice across the ruined city. "I am your end, your silence, your final truth. Bow now, and you may serve Aveno." One moved, he waited, then laughed. And that was when a boy no older than 10 stepped into the open, his clothes torn, his face smeared with dust, but his eyes steady. In his small hands he held a strange device, a mix of alien and human parts, glowing faintly. Zoltran raised a brow, amused. "You think that toy will harm me, child?" The boy said nothing. He only pressed a button. The explosion that followed was not large, not blinding, but precise. A wave of energy burst upward, slicing through the gaps in Zoltran's armor, sending sparks and black blood across the ground. From the shadows a woman screamed and ran forward, dragging the boy back. As Varnic guards descended, firing blindly, but they were too late, because humans had been waiting. Snipers on rooftops launched harpoons made from alien bone, sharp and fast. They pierced the knees of giants from underground tunnels. Came fighters with flame packs and stun rods. From behind rubble came old men with rifles, young girls with slings, even a blind man who walked with a stick filled with steel nails. They did not fight for victory, they fought for memory, for those who had fallen. And Zoltran staggered for the first time in his reign. He fell to one knee, roared in fury, and a voice answered from the broken sky. It was Lucas, now flying the stolen alien skimmer, firing bursts of stolen plasma into the king's chest again and again, until the great Varnic ruler collapsed into the dust of Earth. Varnic, watching from above, frozen, placid. Impossible had happened. Their king had fallen, and not to a fleet, not to a god, but to humans. When the galaxy looked at Earth again, the death of King Zoltran sent ripples through the stars, louder than any weapon ever fired. His name had once meant victory, his shadow had once meant surrender, but now he was gone, and his body lay buried in Earth soil, wrapped in the very flags he came to destroy across the galaxy. Species that had lived in silence for centuries began to whisper again. The Graskin, the Koro, the silent people of Velis all turned their eyes to the small blue world that no one had respected before, and they watched as humans carried their wounded and buried their dead, not with tears but with songs and stories. They watched as humans dismantled alien tech not to conquer others, but to heal their own lands. They watched as humans reached out to nearby stars, with signals not of war, but of alien. Something began to shift in the heart of the Galactic Council. Once ruled by fear, now stood a question cooled. Humans-led answer came not with speeches or fleets, but with one simple act. A human ship appeared in orbit around a planet once enslaved by the Varnik. It was not large or armed, but it carried supplies, food, medicine, and a single captain named Sarah, who spoke 12 alien languages, and walked with a limp from the Chicago battle. She landed without guards, and offered no demands, only help. She found the elders of that world, and told them, "We do not want tribute, we want peace, we want friends, we want truth." The elders stared at her and asked why, and Sarah looked at the stars and said, "Because we know what it means to be broken and left behind, and we will never let others feel that again." That moment was broadcast across half the known system. Sand. One by one, planets sent their responsia nota flaga Namathi called Earth the world that roared. They called humans the fire in the dark. They called them the hope no one expected, but not everyone welcomed the change. In hidden corners, old powers stirred, angry, afraid, threatened by the rise of a species that broke rules and rewrote fate. But they hesitated, for they knew now that humans were not easy prey. Back on Earth, the survivors built more than cities. They built monuments out of broken Varnik metal shaped into wings and stars. They engraved names of every human who had fought, not just soldiers, but healers, builders, mothers, fathers, children. Every name mattered. Every name was remembered. Lucas, now a leader, refused titles and power. He only asked for silence when he visited the old battlegrounds, where ghosts still lingered. Sarah returned to the stars not to fight, but to teach. She carried with her a single message, written in every language she had learned, where humans who came from pain, but we walk toward light. The message burned into the stars. In a quiet plain beneath the wide sky, humans gathered around a massive structure, built from the strongest metal of the fallen Varnik ships. It stretched higher than mountains and wider than cities. It was a mural, a monument, a message carved into the heart of Earth for every traveler and every star to see. The image was simple yet powerful, a human hand reaching out, and a Varnik claw falling away, broken and defeated. Below it were words written in every language known across the galaxy, and some that only humans understood. "We are humans. We do not start wars, but we will finish them." Crowd was silent, not out of fear, but out of respect. Some wept quietly, others held hands tightly, but all knew this was more than a monument. This was a promise. For centuries humans had been underestimated, mocked, and feared, but now they were remembered and respected. Their strength was not just in muscle or weapon, but in spirit and heart, in the will to rise again. No matter how many times they fell from distant planets, messages arrived in waves of light, ships carrying ambassadors of peace and curiosity, but also ships ready to defend and stand beside Earth in times of need. For the galaxy had changed forever. In the quiet corners of space, the last of the Varnik ships turned away, their pride shattered, their legend broken by a species they thought weak, a species that refused to be broken. They vanished into the shadows, waiting to be forgotten, but Earth would never forget, and neither would the stars. Back on Earth, Lucas stood beside the mural, his eyes tracing the carved words. He thought of the boy who stood before the king, the woman who fought in the alleys, the millions who never gave up, whispered to the window, "We're never alone, we were never weak, we were never invincible, Beckes, we were always human." And as the sun rose higher over the new dawn of Earth, a quiet hope spread across the world that this was only the beginning of a story that would be told for generations to come. A story of a planet small and blue, where humanity rose from the ashes of fear and fire to show the universe that they were not to be taken lightly. They were human sand, they were unstoppable enough. The endless sky where winds whispered ancient stories. Humans gathered in silence around a towering monument forged from the shattered remnants of their greatest enemy. The Varnik metal gleamed faintly under the soft light of dawn. It was more than just a structure, it was a testament, a promise, a beacon to every corner of the galaxy. Carved deep into the metal was a symbol, a hand reaching out, strong and steady, a symbol of hope and defiance. Below it lay words spoken in the tongues of countless worlds, a message clear and unyielding, where humans who do not seek war, but if war finds us, we will end it. The crowd was a sea of faces, old and young, scarred and hopeful. Some held onto memories, others carried dreams, but all shared a fire burning brighter than any star, the fire of survival, the fire of unity, the fire of a species that refused to be broken. For beyond the atmosphere, ships from once enslaved and once fearful races arrived, not with weapons, but with hands extended in peace and alliance. For the story of Earth was no longer whispered in fear, but sung in respect. Varnik, who once believed themselves invincible, now faded into the shadows of history. Their legends broke and their pride scattered like stardust, yet their fall was a lesson. Carved into the heart of the universe, Lucas stood tall beside the monument, his eyes reflecting the shining metal, his thoughts on those who fought, those who fell, and those who rose. He whispered to the stars above, "You were never alone, you were never powerless, we're always human." And as the sun climbed higher, painting the sky with gold and hope, a new chapter began, a chapter where humanity no longer hid in the darkness, but walked proudly in the light, ready to face whatever the cosmos would bring. The story of Earth was written in courage and carved in steel, a story to be told through ages, a story of a species once doubted, but now unstoppable. This was only the beginning. The end.